Beer. Celebrated around the world for its versatility and unique flavor combinations, beer has become a staple of modern times. As testament to its popularity, small craft breweries are popping up around the country and here in Michigan. Where once the market was saturated with generic, watered-down beverages, local artisans have been busy reintroducing our palates to a variety of wonderful new flavors, and along the way have reminded us of what beer is really all about. Join us as we meet with Dr. Phil Howard and learn more about how the beer market is changing through distribution practices. Take a trip to Founders Brewery in Grand Rapids, Michigan for a tour of the facilities and listen to co-founder Dave Engbers' story of how he got involved in the industry and what he loves most about beer. Later, we'll join Aimee and Abby in the kitchen as they demonstrate how to make a delicious dessert using a rich Founders Porter. So sit back and take a load off with your favorite brew as ELFCO and friends share an inside look at the awesomeness that is beer.
Well, there's been a trend in a lot of different food and beverage industries towards consolidation. You have markets that are increasingly controlled by fewer and fewer companies. Soft drinks, an example where it's been that way for a long time. We've had over 3/4 of all sales controlled by Coke and Pepsi for decades. And there are a lot of other industries that are approaching that model, which is a duopoly. So it's not a monopoly controlled by one firm, but you have two firms that control pretty much everything. And so there's this appearance of choice, but in actuality, those two companies compete in very specific areas like advertising, but they don't necessarily compete in other areas in ways that would be beneficial for us as consumers. The price of Coke and Pepsi product are much higher than some smaller, independent soft drink companies, but they don't have nearly the market share. And beer is rapidly approaching and essentially the same as soft drinks in the U.S. now. We have about 80% of the market controlled by Anheuser-Busch InBev and Miller Coors, SAB Miller. So both those companies are based in Europe. In fact, globally, about half the beer market is now controlled by 4 European-based companies. And this is a pretty dramatic change from even 5 years ago when it was half the market in the United States was controlled by a U.S. company, Anheuser-Busch. In 2008, Anheuser-Busch was taken over by InBev, which, although it's based in Belgium, is actually run by Brazilians. It was a Brazilian company that kind of merged with InBev. So now all their upper-level management are people who kind of took over the beer industry in Brazil, and now they're taking over the world. It's really interesting. We have this convoluted distribution system in the United States where the beer producers then go through some distributors, and they are essentially granted a monopoly, and they're a very powerful lobbying force. They maintain that extra step of distribution because it gives them really huge profits. In fact, I think John McCain's wife made her fortune in distributing beer, and they have so much power that if you're, say, a retailer or a bar and you manage to offend the distributor, you can just get cut off. And so that makes it really tough, and you can see how these play out in some states where, in Colorado, the governor or the guy who was running for governor was actually, he helped start some microbreweries. So he wanted to make the laws friendlier, and then the big brewers came in to try and fight those proposed regulations. Beer Wars talks about the fact that if you have a small beer, the only way to get it into retailers other than distributing it directly, which is very hard to do, is to go, well, in fact, I think that's actually illegal in a lot of places. So you have to go through the distributors, which are all under the thumb of Aimee, InBev, and Miller Coors. So you have to convince those big corporations to carry your products, which is not in their best interest to do that. You know, that's one of the reasons why, what's the name of it? The Craft Brewers Alliance, or a bunch of craft brewers got together. They were 1/3 acquired by Anheuser-Busch, and now Anheuser-Busch distributes those products. And then they acquired Goose Island, and within a few months turned around and sold 100% of Goose Island to Anheuser-Busch. So that's why you can find Goose Island out of Chicago everywhere now, is because Anheuser-Busch is the owner, and they're distributing it everywhere now. On the positive side, beer is one industry where, as a result of changes in regulations, it's become much easier to have some real choices. There's been an explosion of microbrew beers, and they're available increasingly at even big, massive retailers. So depending on where you are, as long as you're not in Mississippi or Louisiana, it's pretty easy to find a local microbrew. So you can support something that's going to keep those dollars in your community. It's not going to be shipped as far, and all those other values that people want to support. Michigan is in the top 5 in per capita microbreweries, and they tend to be in the northern United States, which those were the first states to kind of deregulate home brewing and microbrewing. But there are still states like Mississippi where it's illegal to home brew. Co-ops don't charge slotting fees, so if you're a small producer, whether it's a soft drink or a beer, you're going to be able to get into the shelves of a co-op much easier than a massive supermarket chain. And then co-ops support values that are in line with the smaller producers. So you have cooperation among cooperatives. There are even some cooperative beer producers, like in Austin. There's a brew pub, which is cooperatively owned by the customers, which is a really fascinating case. And co-ops have been doing a good job of highlighting what's local and what's not, which is, it's very difficult for the consumer to see sometimes when you have some of these fake microbrews like Shock Top and Blue Moon. It's helpful to have a retailer that can kind of cut through that veil and help people figure out what they're actually supporting with their purchases. Well, co-ops like ELFCO are a great place to find local beers. They're going to have a good selection of local beers. They're going to have some good relationships with those local breweries, and they're going to be very knowledgeable about what's involved. ELFCO will have tastings of beer, for example, so that you can find out what you like and what you want to support.
How many of these beers are local?
Over 95 of the beers are local, and we're always getting new ones in and other ones going out due to the seasonality of it, or how many barrels they've made for that batch, because sometimes it's, as you know, it's a very short run and you only get 24 bottles. So it's around 95.
So we have limited edition stuff here?
We do have limited edition stuff. Right now we have, I think it's called Turgeon, and it's in the back, and we've got 24 bottles of it that are just waiting to get handed out to some of our excellent beer club members.
What do you mean beer club member? What's that?
We have just recently put together a beer club where you can join the ELFCO Beer Club, and there is going to be tours to different breweries, and you'll get like inside information on when new stuff is coming out to the store here, and just what's going on within the Michigan beer industry.
Nice.
Yeah.
How do our prices compare to some of the other? Because it's a college town. There's a lot of places
It
to
is.
get beer.
It is, and from what I've looked, we're very comparable to most everybody, as in anything where we are alcohol is state regulated, so there's a certain percentage you have to hit in order to sell it, and everything that you can buy a mix and match 6-pack and get 10% off whatever you mix and match. So I think with that, we're definitely comparable to anybody else. Plus, we have a great selection of Michigan beer. So if you want a Michigan beer, this is the place to come.
I've seen you do a lot of stuff through Facebook where you're talking about Michigan moments.
Yes.
And so, can you say a little bit about that?
A Michigan moment is where I go around the store and I find food items that go together to make maybe not a whole meal, but a good portion of the meal, because we have pasta and we have meat and we have spaghetti sauce and we have bread and we have beer and we have wine and we have cheese. And so I'll go around and just collect those items to maybe make a Michigan-made omelet with Michigan eggs and Michigan vegetables and Michigan meat, or it's a Italian sausage with grandfather's pork, and then we have noodles from Detroit, and then spaghetti sauce from Detroit. And so it's not the full meal, but it's a good portion of it, and it's a great, easy way to enjoy a Michigan moment just by eating dinner or lunch or breakfast. Kind of sneaks it into your day.
So sort of an advanced version of pairings.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly. So, and it brings, it's amazing how many products are made in Michigan. I never realized the amount of just on-the-shelf items that were made in Michigan. I mean, you always think of Michigan and like apples and wine and beer, but you don't realize that there's spaghetti sauce and there's noodles and there's frozen foods and there's, it's amazing. We encourage Michigan items. We're a local store. We only have the one building. So, we're very involved in our community. Our community is very involved with us, and we really like to, promote Michigan and everything that we have to offer, whether it's items all the way from Iron Mountain or Kalamazoo or to the very edge, to show how great we are as a state. The interesting thing is a lot of people don't realize this, and honestly, I never realized this till a week ago when one of our sales reps came in, and you can mix and match your beers to make different flavors. So say that you can take a Crispin, which is not made in Michigan actually, and you can mix it with Radler, and it makes a summer shandy flavor, which is really nice because it adds a little different flavor to the original Radler beer. It kind of makes the Crispin a little different, but yet you're still enjoying a beverage by the lake or by the sea, but it freshens it up. It gives it a nice new crisp flavor.
Do you do samplings?
We do, and we did samplings with mixing the alcohol, and everybody loved it. It was amazing how many people enjoyed doing that. And we took the vanilla porter as well from Atwater Brewery right here and did it. It's a 50-50 mix with the Crispin, and that kind of makes it's a dark beer. So a lot of people like the fact that it wasn't as heavy when it was mixed with the Crispin. It lightened it up. It gave it kind of you still had that nice vanilla coffee flavor, but it was a little crispier.
Typically we get like some of the really exclusive stuff like Devil Dancer, the KVS, and we only get one case of it. The old curmudgeon, which is right here. We ended up with 3 of each of these.
So are these in any particular order here? I mean, are you supposed to...
You want to try the all day?
I know
It'll be the lightest.
Let's try it with that, yeah. So I've never done like a real beer tasting before. I've done a wine tasting where you start with the lighter and you move your way
You're
up.
going to want to probably kind of stick with that, don't you think, Paul? I mean, start with a lighter. You're not going to want to start off with a stout and then go to a lighter.
Well, usually you don't want to start with an IPA because it's kind of a palate killer. So I would probably put that near the back. I would think, but I don't think necessarily have to go from light to dark. I think it's more about the hops.
Now, when you guys talk about IBUs, what is that?
International Bittering Unit.
Oh, it's a bittering unit. Okay. So the higher the IBUs, then usually the more hops it has, because that makes it bitter, correct?
Yeah. And after like certain many, I don't know, it's like 150 or 120 IBUs, you can't taste anymore. That's as bitter as it goes. And people will put 180 IBUs in something. Well, it's like you can't taste past a certain point.
Your taste buds don't recognize it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 112 right there, so that's way
that
up
is
there.
outstanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty easy drinking and stuff like that. I'm one of the organizers of Lansing Beer Week. We have several events coming up from a chocolate and beer pairing in downtown Markwell, beer tasting boat cruise, and a brewery tour of 3 breweries in Lansing. So we have like several.
I better sign up for one of these, right?
Yes, sir. On all Founders Beer today is 20% off.
Nice.
Well, probably purchase it.
Yeah.
That's great.
We sample 3 times a month, and they vary. We've been trying to always do one the last Saturday of every month, and then the other 2 rotate around holidays, schedules, fun times. Like, for example, we're doing one Friday the 13th to celebrate Friday the 13th, and we are going to use Evil Genius and Zombie Killer and Mad Hatter, because we figured those are great beers to try on Friday the 13th. You gotta have a little fun with alcohol. Not only can you use beer to drink or to mix with other beers, as we were talking about earlier, but you can also cook with it. You can turn it into a sauce. You can make cupcakes and muffins with it, or bread with it. Beer bread is very popular. I made a chocolate cake using the Founders, and it was excellent. And then it's also not only in the cake, but also in the chocolate glaze that went over top of the cake. And even people who don't like beer liked the chocolate cake. It did not have an overpowering beer taste to it, but it just kind of gave it a nice beer flavor.
Do you think that, would you be willing to do something like that, and we could film it?
Definitely, yes. I'd be more than happy to show you the cake that we made.
My name is Dave Engbers. I'm co-founder of Founders Brewing Company here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and we're celebrating our 15th year. It's 2012 right now, so glad to be here.
I'm Steve. I am the beer and wine buyer at the East Lansing Food Co-op, and I'm here with Dave to do an interview on why Founders exists and why their beer is so good. So you already answered the first question when you guys were established.
Yeah, 1997. My partner Mike and I met while we were in college at Hope College, and I got out of school in '93, taught elementary school for 1 year, and had my first summer off, and I didn't like having time off, and I had started homebrewing when I was 19 years old. My mom bought me my first homebrew kit when I was 19. And she did that because I showed an interest. I started drinking beer at a fairly early age, and my oldest brother in California introduced me to home brewing and craft beer when I was around 17 years old. So I started brewing, like I said, when I was around 19 years old, and then it really just kind of took over my life. I mean, every weekend that's what I was doing, was either brewing or bottling, and beer had become such an important part of my life that I thought, if I could make a living doing this, why not? So, anyway, I got out of school after my first year of teaching. I called my friend Mike and I said, this is our pipe dream in college. I'm like, let's live without regrets. I said, if it works, great. But I said, I said, I never want to say what if. And so, he said, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it." And I said, we're young enough to bounce back if everything hits the fan. And after a couple of years, it looked like things were going to hit the fan, and that's really where we kind of changed our focus. Initially, our beers were pretty pedestrian, and they're well-made, well-balanced beers, but I kind of felt they were unremarkable. And so we were literally on the brink of filing for bankruptcy, and we said, if we're going to go out of business, let's go down brewing beers that we want to drink. And that became our slogan: we brew beer we want to drink. So all of our beers got bigger, bolder, more complex, big aromatics. And when we started doing that, all of a sudden beer enthusiasts started coming out of the woodwork. And apparently other people wanted beers that were bigger and bolder. And anyway, since then it's just been a crazy ride.
So what have been some of the challenges that you've gone through as far as owning a craft brewery and then becoming this size, actually?
Well, you know, we're very aware of that. I mean, it's never been smooth sailing. There's always been challenges. You know, Mike and I neither one of us were business majors or marketing majors, and that does play a huge role in what we do. There's the beer side of things, but then there's, you know, how to go to market, how to finance expansions, how to run a business, and those were challenges in the early days, and they still are. But you know, initially too, I think because we were fairly young when we started the brewery, we wrote the business plan when I was 23 years old, and so a lot of things were knee-jerk reactions. We'd look at artwork and say, oh, you know, that looks good, let's go with that, and didn't really process fully how everything has to have, you know, kind of the same look, tone, and feel, and have the same personality. And so we did make a lot of mistakes. You know, we made a lot of snap decisions. Now we kind of run things a little differently. We run a lot of things through committee and get a few more eyes on it. So we had this mindset that we need to brew a beer for this kind of person. We need to brew a beer for this demographic. And then it really took us until we were on the brink of filing for bankruptcy, until we kind of had the nerve to say, we're just going to make beers for ourselves. And maybe it doesn't fit a business plan, but you know, brewing bigger beers that were more complex, higher in alcohol, you know, had a smaller. There's no question that it had a smaller audience, but that audience was just begging for those kind of beers. Those were some of our early challenges. You know, I would say some of our challenges now is, since we've moved over into this location at 235 Granville. We've been here, this is our 5th year, and when we moved over here, there's 15 employees. Last I heard, we have 115. So we've hired 100 people in the last 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
So a major challenge now, and I mean, I shouldn't say it sounds like such a challenge, but it's really maintaining who we are and our culture and the founder's philosophy. And you know, as more and more people come into the fold, we want to make sure we're very focused on making sure that we stay who we are.
So where do you see yourself going in the next 5, 10, 15 years? Because you've expanded this far over 15 years. Do you plan on becoming a larger brewery that's worldwide, nationwide?
I would assume that we will continue to grow. Our growth rate has been through the roof. We've been in 2009 and also 2011. We were the second fastest growing brewery in the world, or in the United States. And we are seeing so much growth in our existing markets that we take maybe some aggressive risks at you know, putting on additions and increasing our capacity. But imagine that it took us 10 years to get to 5,000 barrels, to brew 5,000 barrels. That was in 2007. 2008, our first year here, we nearly doubled that to just under 10,000. The following year, we nearly doubled it again to 19,000. The next year, we did 43, or 28, excuse me, and then to 43. So 43,000 in 2011, and we are on track to growing around 90,000 barrels in 2012.
So you've doubled in size basically.
Almost every year.
The last 5 years you've been doubling your capacity.
Yeah.
When will you all grow this facility?
Well, you know, I don't know. We've done some facility studies, and you know, I always joke that we hate parking lots because it seems like when we built this facility, we kind of had a 5-year plan, and 18 months into it, we were at year 5, and so we continue to take parking lots out, and we just installed a beautiful 85 barrel brew house made by Steinecker, the first combi cube in the United States. So that was where a lot of our folks that work in production were parking. We took out a massive part of the parking lot behind us to house our new packaging line and our second cellar. I don't know. Parking lots are, I shouldn't say they're the enemy, but
They're going away.
they're going away.
Yeah. So do you source your products locally, or?
A lot of, most of the ingredients that we do source, most of our base malt comes from major suppliers that are not local. We use some of the local hops. But whenever possible, if we have a product that we can source locally that meets our standard, our quality standard, we will definitely use that. And obviously, the biggest ingredient that we use here is water. And here we are in the Great Lakes watershed, and water becomes 90% of our ingredients is water. I think that really says a lot about a lot of the breweries in Michigan. That you've got some of the highest rated breweries in the world. We've been voted the second highest rated brewery in the world 2 years in a row. Bell's down in Kalamazoo is right behind us at number 3. And then we've got a bunch of our brothers in the industry here in Michigan, Dark Horse, The Livery, Jolly Pumpkin. We've got some phenomenal brewers out of the state, and we're all using Lake Michigan water.
I had read that water makes the beer.
Water, it really does.
Water is the beer.
People
flavor.
kind of joke about it because people tend to think that water is just kind of bland and tasteless, but it's not. And so, yeah, we've got a great source in the Great Lakes. And then we also have some beers like our Cerise Cherry Ale, which we use Traverse City cherries, Michigan tart cherries. Those are delicious. Anytime we're playing around with using honey in our beer, we have a friend, local farmer, and he's a big fan of our pale ale, and we're a big fan of his honey. And I'm sure there's some trading that goes on there.
Definitely.
Absolutely. And then obviously every year we have our harvest ale, and our wet hopped harvest ale is literally when the hops are harvested and they are overnighted to us. So they will go from the farms to our brew kettle literally within 24 hours.